Welcome back, folks. Thanks for joining us again for our guest artist series. We are on episode 10, so thanks for sticking with us. Today I have the pleasure of having Kianna Dugan-Haas join us. Kianna is a former SDP intern, and she most recently was seen on Shakespeare Hill as the Keeper of the Hill. Thanks for joining us, Kianna. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. We're happy to have you this morning. This is a brand new perspective than what we've heard on our guest artist series as an apprentice, as a high schooler performing Shakespeare, so we're really excited to hear your insight. Let's just get started then. The first thing we want to know is what draws you to Shakespeare as a high schooler and as a performer?
I had been drawn to Shakespeare for a long time. I first saw a show at Shakespeare in the Park. I saw The Tempest in 2009 when I was 8 years old, and I loved it, and so I kept coming back. So I think that sort of part of what drew me to Shakespeare was seeing how cool and interesting it could be, how many different ways you can take it on. So I liked the sense of creativity and playfulness, I think, that comes out of Shakespeare. And you know, we're all told like Shakespeare is like the base person, the thing you want to be building off of as a theater practitioner.
I love the point you made about how Shakespeare can be creative and inventive. And something we just talked about in our last episode was the fact that Shakespeare has its language, but you can take that language and really put it in any type of setting. And I mean setting, you know, physically, but also setting conceptually. And I think that draws people in and makes them more engaged with the text, for sure. So as a high schooler, part of an English curriculum is reading Shakespeare. How has working on Shakespeare Hill as a high schooler influenced your appreciation for those type of texts when you're learning them in school?
I think plays are meant to be seen performed more so than read. So it's very helpful for me to have exposure to performances of Shakespeare. No, the first Shakespeare play I read in high school was Romeo and Juliet, and I had seen it the year before because that was the last time the Hill did it. So that was very helpful to see these shows the way they're meant to be done, and to see them active and to see them be viscerally felt. I think, you know, it packs a lot more of a punch than just reading these things does. And then conversely, reading them gives you this great appreciation for the people who work on productions of them, because you see how many layers go into that text, and you see all the things that he gives you, all these precious, beautiful details, and you also see all of these sort of technical things that he leaves up in the air for you to figure out as a director, as an actor, as a designer, whatever it may be.
I want to go back really quick to what you said in your first response regarding how Shakespeare is the baseline. Why do you think it's important for artists and actors to partake in Shakespeare?
I think that Shakespeare covers a lot. Both he has a good variety of plays of different sort of styles and tones, but also his individual plays, he tends to pack a lot in there. And then I think that Shakespeare and the ancient Greeks, in a lot of ways, sort of founded the practices and the styles that have sculpted modern Western theater. So it's nice to go back to the classics and to look at, here's this contemporary play that I like, this contemporary movie that I like, sort of what does it come from? So they're just stories that are built to last.
Built to last is a perfect way to put it, and you can see that through, like you said, the fact that his storylines and his plot lines and those token characters that he's created were actually influenced by older stories, and how his plot lines and storylines taken and then modernized and put into more recent works and more recent plays, both plays but also films and musicals and stuff like that. You know, the lover's storyline that you see from Romeo and Juliet in everything from West Side Story to even like High School Musical. Like you said, it transcends multiple time periods but also multiple ages. So how has specifically working with Shakespearean text helped you grow as an actor?
I remember specifically talking, sort of breaking down and analyzing Shakespeare's text and just seeing that he gives you so much. And we're sort of taught those sorts of techniques with Shakespeare really, really well, but they translate to lots of other playwrights as well. Also, because it's tricky text. It's a good workout for your brain. And it also means that you have to really commit to what you're saying so that people who are hearing this for the first time, who haven't spent 3, 4, 5 weeks analyzing these words, understand what you're saying, what you're feeling, what is going on. That's one of the best things that you can learn from working on Shakespeare, is trust the text.
Being able to translate what you're saying through your emotions physically and vocally is so important for an audience to understand what's going on. Can you just describe to us briefly what the Apprentice Shakespearience program is?
Sure. So it varies a little bit show to show, but the program is involvement in the rehearsal and performance process of whichever specific show you sign up for or get selected for, as well as classes 4 days a week. Those cover anything from analyzing Shakespeare's text to a stage combat, history of Shakespeare's life. We talk about sort of how to help make Shakespeare feel more modern, talk about Shakespeare's costumes and sets and things, and then towards the end of that class process, it turns into a rehearsal process for our own little intern show, which is usually about 30 minutes to an hour in the actual shows. In my experience, I've mostly been a sort of stagehand-like role. On King Lear, we did get a little bit of stage time as well. We were all involved in the big fight scene, and we're helping out with moving sets, with setting up at the top of the show. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's a very packed experience.
It's always so amazing to see the passion that high schoolers can have for Shakespeare, but also it's really cool to see that melding between like students and professional actors, which is what Shakespeare in Delaware Park was built upon, the partnership with UB and bringing in college students to work on shows, to experience that professional environment. And it's always so cool to be watching a show in the audience and seeing high school students going on stage and acting with professional local actors, or actors who come in from out of the region, and equity actors. It seems like a really great experience for high school students. So going specifically now to, we talked about Shakespeare objectively. I'd like to talk about Shakespeare from your perspective, specifically on Shakespeare Hill. How does performing on an outdoor stage differ from performing on an indoor stage, taking into account weather, taking into account the time of day that we perform, taking into account the fact that you are just outdoors? How does that influence your experience as an actor?
Live theater is one thing that you kind of never quite know what you're going to get. And then you take live theater and put it outside, and it's an adventure. I've worked my fair share of rainouts, those days when you're like squeegeeing the stage at 7 p.m. in hopes you can get it dry enough that it'll be safe to go up at 7:30. And, dogs are barking and fireworks are going off and all sorts of things. But one thing that I always like to keep in mind is that that's kind of how Shakespeare did it. Shakespeare did his shows in a theater without a roof at like 2:00 in the afternoon, and the groundlings would sometimes bring animals in with them onto that ground level, and they would throw food, thank God. So in my experience, our audiences don't throw food at us. But, I think there's something sort of fun and earthy about the fact that we're out there, we're exposed, we have to interact with the elements. And I think it makes it even more magical. when King Lear yells, "Blow, winds!" and it is like 9:30 p.m. and it's dark and the big strawberry moon has risen behind the hill, and maybe it is a little windy, maybe it is starting to feel a little stormy. There's something very special and magical about that.
That's a great point that hasn't been brought up yet. The fact that this is very similar to what Shakespeare was experiencing when he wrote these plays, for the time period that he wrote these plays. And that's such a fantastic point of, it makes it even more genuine and more sincere what we're doing. Yeah, there's something really cool, like you said, when the sun goes down after intermission and you're in the heat of Act 2 and you look behind and it's just the shadowed silhouettes of the trees and Hoyt Lake. It really amplifies what's going on. Thank you so much, Kianna, for joining us this morning. We really appreciate getting your insight as a former high schooler, as a former high school apprentice, as a current, student pursuing art. It's a really cool thing, and we are lucky to have you a part of our Shakespeare family. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in this morning. Make sure to like and tag your friends, and we'll see you next week.